Hello, everybody. Welcome to yet another daily OneTAKE Live, our continuation in this experiment of taking OneTAKE to everybody via LinkedIn Live, live streaming every day if I can, to take advantage of, first and foremost, the fact that a lot of us are at home and maybe we're looking for some distractions, or perhaps we're even just looking for useful information that's relevant at this time and place we find ourselves. So first and foremost, I want to welcome you to this live stream. If others are asking how they might be able to see it too, ask that they follow me on LinkedIn. That seems to be the only way for you to get the alert and the update that this is actually happening. We're trying to still figure out how to post and let people know that we are live streaming. We're going to try to do it every day around this time, maybe a little earlier. Next, I want to just wish everyone health and good safety. I hope everyone's taking care of themselves, their families, their loved ones, their communities in this trying time. Certainly interesting times we live in. Next, after that, if you are looking for, and you find yourself working at home and you're looking for tips and tricks on how to learn from home, work from home, teach from home, I invite you to check out a resource that SYKES just published. It's free, it's publicly available, and you can find it at athome.sykes.com. Again, athome.sykes.com. And that's a website that's up there. And also, if you are looking for work at this time, a lot of folks in retail, a lot of folks in hospitality, unfortunately, have found themselves out of work. If you are looking for work, we are hiring. A lot of the skills that you've developed over your career are hugely helpful in supporting customers for the world's leading brands. So please check that out at jobs.sykes.com. And without further ado, I am thrilled to introduce and welcome my next guest. He is a friend, he is a colleague, and his name is AJ Hanna. AJ Hanna, welcome to OneTAKE Live via LinkedIn live streaming. How are you today, sir?
I'm great. Thanks for having me today. Exciting to see you.
Very cool. And before I forget, I'm still getting used to this whole thing. If you are joining us, please do share in comments where you're joining us from. I will take breaks routinely to welcome you from wherever you are from. And if you have questions for AJ or for me, ideally for AJ, especially if they're hard ones, those are all AJ's. If you have really simple questions, I might take one. But please put them in the comments field too, because we would love to make this interactive. So, AJ Hanna, you are you're part of the SYKES, and we're part of and still part of the SYKES Symphony team. But there's more to you than that. Tell us about your background and where you come from, what your experiences have been.
Well, so the majority of the time that I've spent professionally has been a part of the healthcare industry, and having worked on both the payer side for insurance companies and working on the provider side with hospital systems, and having the opportunity to utilize or implement new technologies into those settings. And so never really leave healthcare once you're in it. And so it's still a very critical part of what I think about and what I do. And you know, once you've worked in healthcare, everybody in your family asks you for advice, even though you're not qualified to give it for, you know, health reasons. So you still do that.
Advice all the time, ill-advised, poorly qualified. No, that's great. Thank you, AJ, very much. So we have just done a pretty interesting, frankly, extremely relevant and timely study on healthcare, and specifically on telehealth and telemedicine. Can you tell me a little bit about the survey we just did? Because I want to spend a lot of the time we spend together talking about that, talking about the sort of the structure of the survey, who we surveyed, and what we found.
Sure. So telehealth is an area that has struggled to gain mainstream usage over the years. My first exposure to it was back in the mid-aughts when I was working in insurance, and Medicare started covering it primarily to serve patients and Medicare beneficiaries in rural settings who didn't have access to specialty services. It's steadily grown over time and now is increasing in utilization, but given the time that we're in with COVID-19 and the desire to keep people distant, we were curious about how much knowledge people actually had about telehealth, what their experiences, if any, are with telehealth, and to get their thoughts on whether COVID-19 has impacted their view on telehealth at all. And we found some interesting things.
Well, that's great. Okay, so let's get a sense of, I guess, both context and then scale. So ultimately, we've got a healthcare practice. We are working with some of the world's leading healthcare brands, and we're providing them customer care on multiple different levels, everything from registration and sign up during open enrollment periods to, in fact, telehealth services. And so this is one of the reasons we were so excited. But right now, one of the real sort of catalysts for doing this study was the fact that the demand for telehealth is way up, like through the roof up. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so certainly as insurance companies have more and more made telehealth available to their insureds, and as we know, a lot of decisions about what you choose to utilize in your healthcare services comes from whether or not your insurance company supports it or not. And so we were curious, given everything that was going on, how many people actually had utilized telehealth services. And actually, that was our screening question. So we started by asking people, around 3,400 participants, are you aware of what telehealth is? We gave a brief definition. Anything where the service is rendered via video, via audio, or some other electronic means. Interestingly enough, almost 42%, over 1,400 people that we collected as a part of the survey had never even heard of telehealth. So a significant portion still are not very familiar with what telehealth is.
Okay.
And from there, we looked at geography. So we broke it up evenly across different geographic regions of the United States, the Northeast, the Midwest, the South, and the West. And then through a set of geographic or of demographic breakdowns. And what we found is that while there seems to be an acceptance or recognition of telehealth across the country, we do see different attitudes when you get into the different demographic categories on what their attitudes are and what they'll use. So what the survey represents are 2,000 respondents who have some knowledge of telehealth, and we just surveyed them on what their attitudes and what their personal experiences were with telehealth.
Got it. Thank you. No, that's a huge survey done across the United States, but I imagine there's some relevance and application to other countries. And we've seen, obviously, a lot of people calling in for telehealth and telemedicine guidance right now because, of course, of the coronavirus and COVID-19. So there was some stat I think I remember seeing that telehealth calls were up thousands of % over sort of the baseline. And they're mostly calling, I imagine, because they've got symptoms that they're self-diagnosing and they're looking for help. So do you know any of the stats on how much this has exploded over the last few weeks? And let's get right into the COVID situation. As if I'm calling for a telehealth guidance around COVID, what am I calling for? What's a COVID telehealth call look like these days?
Sure. Well, your statistic is right. Somewhere around we've documented somewhere around a 1,300% increase in the number of telehealth calls just over the last 2 to 3 weeks as coronavirus has continued to spread across the country. And what people would mostly experience in that setting is being in a forum just like this one, where you have normally video connected to a caregiver. Sometimes it's audio only. And that caregiver is going through a set of screening questions. As any of us who've been following this current circumstance knows, one of the first things that the caregiver is going to want to know is, have you been anywhere recently where the virus was known to exist? Have you been in contact with anybody who's been known to be in those regions? Or have you been in contact with anyone that you know has been exposed in some way? Once we start with those screening questions, generally they'll start trying to find out specifically what symptoms the person there on the other side of the chat with has, whether it's fever, whether it's difficulty breathing, and so on, to try to ascertain whether or not this person is a candidate for testing.
Perfect. Okay. Let me take a break there and just welcome the guests that have shared their names and in some locations. Thank you for joining both AJ and myself in this chat today. That include Sridharan Nair. Hello, Sridharan. You were first to comment, so you win a door prize of some form. Maor from Nice. Maor is nice. Hashtag. Welcome, Maor. Thank you for joining us. Sue Kumar. We've got Jeremy Maldonado. Hello, Jeremy. How are you? I hope you're staying safe in Florida. Vaughn Miles is with us. Deepu Kumar. Thank you, Vince Ryan. Morin Konk. Thank you guys for joining us. Please, if you have any questions for us, let us know in the comment field. So, okay. So AJ, a big chunk of the people that we asked hadn't or weren't aware of telehealth, but a large chunk was. And then we asked them what their experience was with it. How did that go? What was the feedback from them?
Yeah, well, the first thing we wanted to understand was what their basic knowledge of telehealth was. So one of the first questions we asked is, are you aware, after we had screened that they know what telehealth is, do you have coverage from your insurance companies? And about 75% of the respondents knew that they had coverage for telehealth within their current sets of benefits. So that logically led to the question, well, have you used it? I'm going to share a graphic with you to show some of the response that we got. So interestingly enough, while 75% of the respondents who had said that they were aware what telehealth was and that their insurance covered it, only about 19% had actually utilized it. So we have within our survey universe, we have high recognition of what it is and that it's covered, but lower utilization than what you might expect with that much knowledge of what's of the tooling. So we've and beyond that, we had a series of people who had expressed that they wouldn't even consider telehealth at all, and we explored some of those reasons in later questions. So. Despite the fact we had about 42% of our respondents not know what telehealth is, we did have 2,000 people who did. They did know that they had coverage on their insurance policy, but still very, very low utilization, even with the group that were aware of what the service was. And this is generally breaking down across demographics. You tend to find utilization and acceptance or consideration in younger generations, the 18 plus, the 55 and older tend to be less inclined to want to utilize telehealth for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, well, that doesn't surprise me, I don't think. Unfortunately, in the current situation we're in, it's the older demographics that will need the help. So hopefully they become comfortable with it. Thank you for sharing the graphic. I think if it presented the way it did for me, then it was somewhat seizure-inducing. So we won't show any more graphics because they sort of flash. But we do have we have them available. We're going to be making them public as well because I think you've written something about the survey, and maybe you can share some information about that with us a little bit later on if others want to learn more about the research that we've done. So specific age groups are more inclined or more comfortable with this means of interacting with healthcare assistants. Certain people haven't heard of it, other people have. The people that have used it are happy with it, and would they use it again?
Yeah, they responded. For those who have used telehealth, we did ask the question, would they consider using it again? And the response rate was very favorable for people who have at least tried it to consider using it moving forward. There was an interesting delineation in some of these questions because some of the respondents said they would consider it, but they would only consider it for certain types of treatment. So there's a perception, as we know, healthcare is personal. The relationship between a caregiver and a patient is something very personal. And so for those who expressed some concern about whether the quality of healthcare that you receive via telehealth is on par with what you would get in person, it's mostly around that idea that people are most comfortable in a setting with their doctor, with a nurse who's actually able to do a hands-on assessment. And again, a lot of that breaks down by demographic. Our 55 and older population within this survey response tended to want to be in an in-person setting more so than some of our younger demographics. Although it was interesting that our 18 to 24 demographic, one of their concerns is that they may not know the caregiver on the other side. So was an interesting response in an environment where you think, today's younger generations are very much more accepting of this idea that you're communicating with somebody that you maybe don't know personally through different interactions. But in this case with healthcare, right, they expressed some concern that they weren't dealing with somebody that they personally knew.
That's very interesting. So they're an informed consumer who understands the value of the person on the other end of the call, which is really interesting in this day of customer experience and services, especially ones we're trying to automate or digitize as much as possible, but they still see value in human interaction, albeit distant or virtual, and the credentials or the personality, or I don't know what do you think that they were concerned about on the other end? Somebody who got them or was experienced? What do we think?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it goes back, regardless of your age, that feeling of security of being in a setting where the caregiver is at. As you know, if you go in, perhaps you've got a sore throat or stuffy head. The doctor does a series of evaluations. The first thing they do is look at your chart to see what conditions you might have that could be causing it. They're going to ask you some screening questions just to figure out what your symptoms really are. But it also almost always comes back to the doctor feeling you, perhaps feeling your neck to see if you have swollen glands, looking down your throat, those types of things that I think people have become accustomed to as a part of the diagnostic process. And with telehealth, clearly that doesn't exist because you're not in the same setting. You're not able to have that personal touch and feel type diagnosis. As a matter of fact, one of our respondents who is less inclined to use telehealth cited that as the primary resistance they have to it. They're concerned that the touch and feel that you would normally get is superior in terms of diagnostic and treatment than what they might be able to get through telehealth.
That's fascinating. So what other results, I suppose, popped out at you and either surprised you or aligned with your expectations of what the audience we surveyed would think about this virtual means of diagnostics and care?
Yeah, so one of the things that I think is not so shocking, especially in the time period we're in right now, as we asked people what they thought the primary benefits of telehealth might be, and we had a couple of questions that ferreted out some of that information consistently. It was the fact that they don't have to be in a waiting room with other people who potentially are ill. So there's a huge benefit, and clearly what we're dealing with right now has some influence over those responses. The convenience of telehealth also played a very high part in satisfaction levels, or what people who had experienced it found desirable about it. So not having to commute to a doctor's office, being able to do things in real time, perhaps without setting an appointment, was attractive to them. So the convenience factors of telehealth were certainly something that people either felt in their experience with telehealth personally was a benefit, or would perceive it as being a benefit. Again, as you look at the things that people are most concerned about, it all goes back to, can I really get the type of diagnosis that's applicable when I'm dealing with somebody remotely? Interestingly enough, two of the biggest use cases for telehealth historically have been around assessment for people who may be in early onset of a stroke or behavioral health. So telestroke and telebehavioral have been two of the primary utilizations of this technology over time. And yet people still are concerned that they can't get a proper diagnosis without being in the room with a caregiver.
So, okay, so I'm going to call upon both your past in healthcare, your current state as far as the research that we're doing in telemedicine, telehealth, and don't let me forget to ask you to share where people can find this information. But you've also spent a lot of time, and you're one of the recognized global experts in applying automation and digital technologies, specifically to healthcare, healthcare operations. Do we think that the application of automation, full spectrum automation, I'm talking back office, transactional to diagnostic to AI, et cetera, do we think today's day and age, because of the urgency that we're all facing to make a lean and heavily stressed healthcare operation just capable of putting up with and keeping up with the volume, and really this turning point that we're facing that's really a catalyst to invest in new, do we think this is a good thing for the transformation and the digitization of healthcare in the US and globally?
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt. Really, the purpose of any healthcare organization, specifically on the provider side, is the provision of care. And all of the things that take our caregivers away from being able to spend that time with us, knowing who we are, understanding our history and what our conditions are, and being able to assist us in maintaining our own health. Anything that can be done to allow more of that time, I think, is going to continue to take hold within the healthcare realm. And this current generation or era of automation is one of those eras where I think we're going to be able to, we talk about, from a SYKES perspective, we talk about putting the health back into healthcare, one caring interaction at a time. Well, ultimately, that's what it is. It's being able to spend that time utilizing the tools, whether it be any of the intelligent automation suite, RPA, robotic desktop automation, all the way to the artificial intelligence applications, machine learning applications that are being used specifically on the clinical side of the house, will continue to allow our caregivers to focus more of their attention on us and less of their attention on the technology that is being used to be in the business of healthcare.
That's great and encouraging. And I hope that we do see that application of technology to really support the absolute front line right now. I think all of us have found, while there always was a respect, found a newfound respect at even higher levels for everyone in the healthcare industry, trying to take care of patients across the planet at the moment. So I had said I'd give you a chance to share how others can access the results of this research. So how might they? Do we have it published online? Is there a link somewhere?
Yeah, so later this afternoon, you'll be able to find a link on sykes.com. And we'll be distributing that to all my social media platforms. So my Ask AJ Facebook and Twitter accounts, along with our SYKES accounts, will let people know where they can get access to that information. And we'll be interested in hearing people's feedback. For those who weren't a part of the survey, who have a chance to see the data, we would love to hear what people's reactions are, what their personal experiences are with telehealth, and what their views are on this technology being a viable alternative to traditional face-to-face medicine.
Perfect. So we'll publish the link too. I'll share it over my social media channels. We'll post this interview on OneTAKE website in a few days too. And I am shocked and disappointed at myself that I did not bring up Ask AJ. So everybody who's listening should absolutely go to YouTube and check out Ask AJ. It's where AJ for years now has been sharing his expertise and his experience in deploying automation, specifically robotic process and desktop automation in any environment. Frankly, it wasn't just healthcare. It just so happens that's where where you cut your teeth with RPA. So check that out. Do me a favor and follow AJ on LinkedIn and go hunt him down on YouTube to see that channel. What else, AJ? You know, it's actually funny. I would be so remiss if I didn't mention this, but you were one of my very first guests on OneTAKE when we were getting this show started. So I'm not sure I've gotten any better, but thank you for signing up for the duty 2 different times to be my guest on OneTAKE. So I really appreciate you spending the time with me today.
No, it's my pleasure. As you know, and as I mentioned earlier, healthcare has a special place in my history and in my heart, and so it's been really fascinating and reaffirming to see some of this, having had the opportunity to watch telehealth over many years and see attitudes change about its usage. So we're looking forward to doing similar things with other pieces of healthcare technology later in the year. So stand by. We'll have some more interesting data coming out in the next weeks and months ahead.
Well, that's great. We've got a question from a gentleman named Kedwin Bachman. I joke because AJ and I both know him. Yes, exactly. And he's asking, he'd like to see how utilization of telehealth changes after this current pandemic. Do we think this is a pendulum swing? Do we think we're going to come back to sort of a business as usual, or is this new way of doing things going to influence the way we just do things?
Yeah, my personal belief is it's going to change the way things happen. So recognize that one of the limitations and these results that we're getting from the 55 and over demographic are not surprising, given many at the upper end of that demographic or Medicare or on Medicare or some kind of government-sponsored healthcare, where utilization and when telehealth was covered was very limited. For example, with Medicare, the patient had to be in what was designated as a rural setting with limited resources. So not anyone who was a Medicare patient could utilize telehealth. Obviously, that's changed. The president made those changes in the last few weeks. And here in the state of Indiana, just yesterday, our governor eliminated the restriction that you couldn't do a telehealth visit only by audio. And so from state to state, there are huge variances in how people can utilize the service. Coverage by payers has been widely variant. But I think as all of these restrictions are being relaxed in this time of crisis, it's going to give us an opportunity to say, really, isn't that the way we should be operating? Is it okay for a licensed practitioner in the state of Indiana to be able to assess a patient in the state of Wyoming? And just because that physician's not licensed there, it doesn't minimize their experience and their ability to help that patient. Right. So I think this period that we're in is going to be very revealing on the ways in which we have, in some ways, throttled the ability of technologies like telehealth to really be able to expand and be utilized to the fullest extent.
No, that's tremendous. You're right. I mean, it makes us question all of the foundations for the decisions that we were making in the past, and examining whether or not we can achieve the same outcome or even better, perhaps, by tapping into a global resource rather than a very local resource. Thanks to the internet, thanks to virtualization, thanks to the platforms that enable the service. That's a great point. Well, AJ, we'll wrap it up there. This is fascinating. Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing the full results in your write-up of this research that we've done. I know for a fact that our clients in healthcare have a great respect for the work that you do, working with them, and really enjoy and value your supports as we help enterprises really across the whole spectrum in healthcare provide great care, and as you say, put care back into healthcare and provide that caring interaction to their customers. So thanks for joining me. If anybody wants to see more of these, please do follow me on LinkedIn. Let others know if you think this is valuable. I'm going to try to keep this up every day if it doesn't kill the poor team that's supporting me doing this live stream activity. And I will leave you again with, I wish you all health and safety. Please take care of yourselves. And if you do find yourself in need of opportunities and jobs, again, SYKES is hiring. Please check that out at jobs.sykes.com. And with that, Mr. Hanna, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Ian. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Take care, everyone. Stay safe and healthy.